You're watching Fish Plates and Scratch Builds. I'm Jonathan, and today I'm going to take some model railway wagons that look like this and turn them into something that looks more like this. Let's find out how. Weathering. It's a word that strikes fear into the hearts of modelers everywhere, and I think at some point we've all considered it and then we've talked ourselves out of it. What if I can't do it right? What if it looks messy and amateurish? What if I ruin a perfectly good, not to mention expensive, wagon, coach or loco? Well, I'm going to have a go for you, and I want to prove that you can achieve some fantastic results just using simple products and simple techniques. Now, it's actually much simpler than you think and really quite a lot of fun. Wagons are a fantastic place to start practicing weathering techniques. They're small, which makes the project easily completable, and you can pick up wagons, especially older ones, for only a few quid second-hand. So that really reduces the sense of risk. Before getting started, I highly recommend looking for images of your chosen wagon. Find out what they actually look like in real life and use that as a template for your own weathering. Every wagon weathered differently depending on where it was, how it was used and what it carried. Trying to achieve a specific look from memory or by guesswork alone won't produce the best results. Okay, enough preamble, let's get into it and find out exactly what I did to weather these wagons. This Crook and Greenway wagon is one of the most toy-like in my collection. It's plasticky and brightly coloured, and I really want to see if I can improve its look. I want to treat the body and the underframe differently, so I separate them. Most wagons are held together with clips, and some may be held with a screw. These wooden plank wagons were commonplace across the railway network for many years. Planks would degrade over time and be replaced. I want to replicate that look on this wagon. To distress the wooden planks a little, I attack them with an abrasive stick. This is a cheap nail file, cut down to a manageable size. I also tried to using a fiberglass pen to scratch away some of the printed livery. Be careful with these pens though, the fibres can cause major irritation. I'm using acrylic paint for this project, Vallejo to be specific. I really enjoy the convenience of their dropper bottles and I find the paint to be good quality. Don't panic too much about specific colours. Get yourself a good set of basic paint colours and you can mix almost any colour you need. I mix together a little brown and white to make a pale brown. Wood is often much paler in real life than we imagine, and I paint this onto a few random planks to simulate repairs having been made. Don't forget, if you're leaving this wagon empty, to paint the equivalent plank on the inside too. This wagon is going to be filled eventually, so it won't really be seen, but I do give the inside a quick coat of paint. I also painted in some of the ironwork on the sides of the wagon. It may not be right for this livery, but I feel it brings out a bit of the existing detail on this otherwise simple wagon. I use a very dark grey rather than an all-out black, which I often find looks too dark. Onto the underframe. It has some basic plastic wheels, so I take these off and replace them with metal wheels later. I pop a small blob of blue tack inside the axle boxes to keep paint from affecting the running of the wagon. This is a well-used mixture. Brown with a bit of dark grey. It makes a very good general grime colour. Using a brush, I stipple this all over the underframe. The stippling is important. It helps give a little texture and avoids uniform brush strokes. The same mixture was used to paint the sides of the wheels, cleaning up the wheel treads as appropriate. They don't pick up power, but it's worth keeping them clean even on wagons. The same goes for the axle pins. I'll clean these up later. Both the body and underframe were set aside to dry. Later, I reunited the two halves. I used some enamel washes to dirty down the overall appearance of the body and blend in those new planks. I chose a brown and a black. Working on a side at a time, the wash is applied all over and then the majority is wiped away using a cotton bud. I used downward strokes to mimic the way dirt would streak with the rain. The remaining colour collects between the details in all the recesses, just like real dirt. For the underframe, I'm using weathering powders, sometimes also called dry pigments. Using a dry, soft brush, a small amount can be applied to most surfaces. The slight texture of the stippled dirt paint I put on earlier will help the powders to adhere. They stick a lot better than you'd expect. First, a general covering of a dark rust colour. This is followed by some more localised colours. Some lighter rust around the springs, and then some black helps represent areas that receive regular greasing, such as the axle boxes. That's going to do it for now. I'm going to return to this wagon at the end. The remaining 2 wagons are metal bodied, so I decided to try out some rust effects. Once again, I separate the 2 halves and change and weather the wheels. I mix up 3 distinct shades of rust, ranging from dark to light. Rust is generally darker the older it is. Only fresh rust tends to be that bright orange, so I'll need these colours to create some realistic layers. For some extra texture, I added some talcum powder. Try not to add too much as it can turn into a claggy, useless mess. I started with the wagon's interior, stippling the darkest colour across all surfaces. I found that too much of the blue livery was peeking through, so I waited until it had dried, and then I applied a second layer of the same colour for better coverage. Then I repeated the stippling process with the lighter shades, adding each one more sparingly to build up several layers of varying tones, being sure not to completely obliterate the previous colour. The combination of talcum powder and stippling makes for some excellent tones and textures. Using the fiberglass pen, I distressed the exterior printed detail to suggest some fading. The resulting spread of white paint had the added benefit of making the blue livery look faded too. Next, I repeated the rust process, adding paint in localised areas rather than covering the whole body. I wanted some of the original livery to show through. The underframe of this wagon received the same grime treatment as the wooden-bodied wagon. Everything was set aside to dry. Later on, I made a watered-down version of the underframe grime mixture and used it as a wash for the body. Using cotton buds, I removed most of the paint in downward streaks, leaving only trace amounts behind. This helps blend all the effects together and stops them from looking overly bright. I applied weathering powders to the underframe in the same way as before. It's looking good. The only problem with this approach is the rust being applied over the paint, which isn't really how rust works in real life. Let's look at an alternative approach. Once again, the wagon is separated and the wheels treated separately. Using the same 3 rusty shades as before, I repeat the rust layering stippling process. This time I apply it to the whole wagon, inside and out. Once again, I set that aside to fully dry. I wanted this wagon to be extra grimy, like really weathered, so the underframe receives the usual grime colour but with some added talcum powder for even more texture. I'm going to apply the wagon's top coat over the rust layer, but obviously I want to preserve some of the rust underneath that I've worked so hard to apply. I'm going to use a masking fluid to paint in the areas that I want to keep. It dries very quickly, so don't use your best brush. I found this out the hard way. A sponge can be useful to apply the fluid more randomly, or you can dip an old toothbrush in and flick the bristles if you're feeling brave. Once dry, usually within about 15 minutes, paint can be applied over the top of the masking fluid. I'm attempting a form of pre-shading here by mixing in darker shades around the panel edges. Once again, this is all left to dry fully, preferably overnight. The next day, I gently remove the masking fluid using a stiff brush. it comes away reasonably easily. If I've been accurate with the masking stage, the rust should show through in a convincing pattern. After this, I apply the grimy wash to the body in the same way as the previous wagon. Weathering powders are applied to the underframe and to some of the body to add some extra streaking effects. Once everything had dried, all 3 wagons received a light misting of a clear matte sealer. In hindsight, I'd probably apply this after painting but before adding the weathering powders, as it does seem to reduce their effect. That just leaves some final touches. Some white paint is dry brushed onto the brake handles. A spot of black forms the grease in the centre of each buffer. A small amount of black wash adds some sheen and sells the idea of lubricated parts. Wagons with opening end doors had horizontal stripes that showed which end was which. These were often painted right over the top of completely rusted bodies. You can paint these with a fine brush, but I'm using a very fine paint pen. These small black patches represent the panels which carried running numbers and other important information about the wagon. I attempted to replicate these using the paint pen. It was too thick really for legible writing, as you'll see, so I went with a kind of suggestion of writing instead. You can be the judge of how effective this really looks. And here's a proper look at the finished wagons. I'm pleased with how they turned out, although there's definitely things I would do differently next time. These wagons date back to the 70s and 80s and are no match for the fine detailed rolling stock we have today. But I think I've proven that with just a few modifications, even the most basic wagon can earn its place on your layout. But these wagons are far from complete. In the next video, I'm going to be looking at some ways that you can make some really simple but effective loads for your wagons to elevate them even further. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Would you like me to make more videos like this one? If so, let me know in the comments and I'll consider making some more videos about weathering different types of wagons in the future. Thanks so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.